Reach into your pocket. Listen to the faint jingle of change. And you may find, among the quarters and pennies, a small, dull coin with a man's face quietly staring eastward. 5 cents. A nickel. It is neither rare nor beautiful. It does not glimmer like gold. And yet, it has been with us for generations. Unassuming, constant, durable. A witness to the everyday. A companion to the grand shifts of time. This is the story of the American nickel, and more precisely, the one minted in the year 1973, a year when the United States found itself uncertain of its future, and when even something as simple as a coin carried the fingerprints of change. Coins are small messengers from the past. They carry dates, faces, emblems, etched in metal, bound to no screen or wire. And they last. They circulate. They survive. Unlike paper money, a coin has presence. Its weight is subtle, its sound unmistakable. It can be held, tossed, flipped, passed, but it is never forgotten entirely. Coins reflect a nation's priorities, its heroes, its buildings, its values, who we honor, what we preserve, what we spend. And when we mint a coin, we say something about who we are. To most, the 1973 nickel was just another coin. 5 cents. A token. A momentary utility. But to the careful eye, it marked the continuation of a legacy, stretching back to the Civil War, and forward to the digital age. It is made of 75% copper and 25% nickel. It weighs 5 grams. It measures 21.2 millimeters in diameter. But its true weight lies not in numbers, but in narrative. Every society must define value. And for the United States, 5 cents has always been a crucial threshold. For decades, a nickel could buy refreshment, a ride, or a call home. It was the coin of the masses, the minimum unit of commerce with maximum reach. It found its way into jukeboxes, parking meters, candy stores, pinball machines, and payphones. It was handled by the rich and the poor, the child and the veteran, the merchant and the farmer. So why does the 1973 nickel deserve a closer look? Because it was born in a moment of national upheaval. And like many things from that era, it is a paradox, stable in form, yet forged in chaos. The Vietnam War was winding down. Richard Nixon was embroiled in scandal. The economy was cracking under inflation. And amid it all, the nickel continued, as it had for more than a century, unflinching, unchanged. The nickel's face, unchanged since 1938, bears the image of Thomas Jefferson, 3rd President of the United States, author of the Declaration of Independence, philosopher, planter, visionary, slaveholder. His image was chosen not merely to honor him, but to present a new American ideal, one of architecture, intellect, and democracy. On the back of the coin, Jefferson's home, Monticello, stands frozen in time. A domed mansion, once built by slaves, now struck by machines. From plantation to press, from Virginia to Philadelphia. It reminds us how power lives in places both small and grand. A 1973 nickel could have landed in a tip jar in Georgia, a church collection plate in Indiana, a child's birthday card in Oregon, or the hand of a soldier returning from Vietnam. Some were lost in couch cushions, others buried in backyards, a few saved in pristine, untouched condition. Their detail sharp, their steps full, their luster untarnished. Every coin tells a story, but the nickel, perhaps more than any other, tells ours. In the episodes to follow, we will trace the history of this 5-cent coin, from the copper panic of the Civil War, to the artistic gamble of Felix Schlag, to the mint floors of 1973, and into the hearts and hands of collectors, children, and citizens. We will explore design, politics, metals, and meaning. Because sometimes, to understand a nation, you only need to follow the change in your pocket. Before there was Jefferson, before there was Monticello etched in metal, the American nickel was born in fire, forged not just in the crucible of coin presses, but in the aftermath of war. It began with necessity, and necessity, as history teaches us, is the mother of change. The year was 1865. The Civil War had ended, at least on paper, but on the streets, in banks, In shops across the fractured United States, another battle raged. A battle over currency. Gold and silver had disappeared from circulation, hoarded during wartime. Copper coins, once common, were now scarce. And paper fractional currency, tiny, fragile banknotes, were distrusted and dirty. Americans wanted something they could hold, something durable and real, something that wouldn't tear, fade, or vanish with a merchant's doubt. And so the US Treasury turned to a new solution. A 5-cent piece, made not of silver, but of a new metal alloy, 75% copper, 25% nickel. In 1866, the very first nickel was minted, known as the shield nickel. It was the product of both political urgency and industrial persuasion. The coin bore a stern Union shield on its face, flanked by leaves, and topped with the inscription, "In God We Trust." On the reverse, the number 5 surrounded by stars and rays. It wasn't just a coin, it was a statement, a declaration of unity, of federal strength, and divine conviction in the wake of national bloodshed. The nickel's very name came from its unusual composition. At the time, nickel metal was uncommon, even controversial. Its inclusion in US coins was no accident. One man, Joseph Wharton, had a monopoly on nickel mining in the US, a powerful industrialist from Pennsylvania. Wharton lobbied Congress to adopt nickel in coinage. And Congress, desperate for alternatives to hoarded silver and worn-out paper, agreed. The shield nickel, however, proved difficult to strike. The intricate rays on its reverse caused coins to crack and dies to wear quickly. By 1867, the rays were removed, a small design change with lasting numismatic significance. The early shield nickels are still hunted by collectors. Today, especially the with rays variety, a symbol of early minting struggle. In 1883, the nickel received a new face. The austere shield was replaced with a graceful rendition of Liberty, herself adorned with a crown of wheat, cotton, and corn. The reverse featured a large Roman numeral V, for 5, but crucially, it said nothing of cents. Swindlers quickly saw opportunity. They gold-plated the coin and passed it off as a $5 gold piece. Merchants were fooled. Confidence was shaken. Thus, the infamous racketeer nickel was born, an early lesson in design oversight. As the 20th century advanced, America wanted something new, something bold. The Liberty head design, though elegant, felt outdated. The frontier spirit demanded a coin that embodied the rugged heart of the nation. In 1913, sculptor James Earl Fraser delivered just that, the Buffalo nickel. The obverse showed a composite portrait of Native American leaders Fraser had met, faces weathered by time and tradition. The reverse, a mighty American bison, standing atop a mound. This was no neoclassical beauty. This was muscle, grit, and memory. But beauty came at a cost. The Buffalo nickel was notoriously hard to mint. Its intricate reliefs wore down dies quickly and caused rapid degradation in circulation. By the 1930s, most Buffalo nickels in circulation had lost their dates, rubbed away by millions of hands, pockets, and purses. Still, they endured. They represented a vision of America that was wild, strong, and unapologetically untamed. By 1937, the Buffalo nickel had run its 25-year course. The US Mint opened a design competition for a new nickel, one that would modernize the coin and stabilize production. Over 390 artists submitted entries, but one stood out, submitted by a quiet, determined German immigrant, Felix Schlag. The age of the bison had ended. A new face would soon appear, but the journey that began in the ashes of the Civil War had left its mark, in metal, in memory, and in the American pocket. The year was 1938. America stood at the crossroads of economic recovery and there, shadows of a looming world war. The bison was gone. In its place, a new face would rise, one that had long stood for liberty, intellect, and the American experiment itself, Thomas Jefferson. After 25 years, the Buffalo nickel had reached the end of its legal run. The mint was free to replace it, and the country, tired of coins that wore down too quickly, demanded something new. In January 1938, the US Treasury announced a national design competition. The rules were simple. The new nickel must feature Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, and Monticello, his Virginia estate, on the reverse. Artists from across the country submitted over 390 designs, but the winner wasn't a seasoned mint engraver. It was a quiet, unassuming sculptor from Chicago, a German immigrant named Felix Schlag. Felix Schlag had arrived in America in the 1920s, escaping the economic chaos of post-World War I Germany. A trained sculptor in Munich, he found work in the US doing memorials, statues, and architectural reliefs. He had never designed a coin. But his entry, clean, neoclassical, balanced, captured the judge's attention. His Jefferson, based on a marble bust by Jean-Antoine Eudore, exuded calm wisdom. His Monticello, drawn in perfect architectural lines, offered harmony. Schlag won $1,000, a large prize during the Depression, but with it came scrutiny. The Mint asked him to revise the reverse. His original version showed Monticello in perspective, at an angle, but the Mint wanted symmetry, clarity. Reluctantly, he adjusted his art to fit the machinery of government. In October 1938, the first Jefferson nickels rolled off the presses in Philadelphia. The obverse bore Jefferson's stern profile. The reverse, a front-on, flat view of Monticello, simple, precise. The design was modern, but also respectful, bridging old-world neoclassicism with new-world practicality. It was, for its time, a revolutionary coin, the first U.S. coin in circulation to feature a president not named Washington or Lincoln, a founding father honored not just for victory, but for vision. Just 4 years after the Jefferson nickel's debut, America was at war. In 1942, the U.S. government needed every ounce of nickel for armor plating, aircraft engines, and military production. And so, for the first time in its short life, the Jefferson nickel had to adapt. Its composition changed from 75% copper and 25% nickel to a wartime alloy, 56% copper, 35% silver, and 9% manganese. These wartime nickels were distinctive, bearing a large mint mark above Monticello, a design first, the P, D, or S above the dome marked which Mint had produced the coin, Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. The inclusion of silver, ironically, made these nickels more valuable, but also softer, more prone to wear. They circulated quietly, often unnoticed by the millions who spent them on ration goods, war bonds, and telegrams home. When the war ended in 1945, nickel returned to its peacetime formula. The Jefferson design remained, but the silver was gone. For coin collectors today, these silver war nickels remain a fascinating chapter, tiny artifacts of a global conflict. Their duller color and oversized mint marks make them both historically and numismatically significant. Though it was born in 1938, the Jefferson nickel would go on to define American pocket change for over 6 decades. Few other coin designs, besides Lincoln's penny or Roosevelt's dime, lasted as long. Felix Schlag, once a little-known sculptor, had created a coin that was not only enduring, but quintessentially American. But by 1973, the world had changed again. Inflation, Vietnam, the Watergate scandal, and in the middle of it all, a quiet, unassuming 5-cent coin continued to tell the story of a changing nation. 1973, a year of tension and transition. The Vietnam War was dragging on. Watergate had cracked the trust of a nation. The price of oil was about to skyrocket. And yet, in the US Mint's bustling factories, the machines kept running, striking coins by the millions, including one small, simple piece of metal worth 5 cents. At first glance, the 1973 Jefferson nickel looked like any other. It weighed 5 grams, measured 21.2 millimeters in diameter, made of a sturdy copper-nickel alloy, 75% copper, 25% nickel. Edge, smooth, obverse, Thomas Jefferson's stern profile, still facing left. Reverse, Monticello, his elegant Virginia estate, centered in stoic precision. But what separated the 1973 edition from earlier years wasn't a radical redesign. It was a matter of scale. of transition, of a mint adapting to the pressures of the modern world. In 1973, Jefferson nickels were struck in 3 mints: Philadelphia, no mint mark; Denver, D mint mark; San Francisco, but only for proof coins. These mints weren't just machines, they were historic temples of precision. Each struck thousands of coins per minute. And for the Jefferson nickel, 1973 would prove to be a major production year. In total, over 384 million Jefferson nickels were minted in 1973. But the numbers tell their own story. 1973 mintage totals: a Philadelphia, no mint mark, tilde 384, 396, 000; a Denver, D tilde 261, 405, 000; a San Francisco, S proofs tilde 2, 760, 339. The Denver mint's production was slightly lower than Philadelphia's, but still massive. San Francisco, meanwhile, was now dedicated solely to proof coins, those pristine specimens struck multiple times for collectors. To understand the 1973 nickel, we must understand 1973. The US economy was under strain. Inflation was creeping upward. Gas prices were about to skyrocket due to the OPEC oil embargo. Coins were increasingly being scrutinized not just by collectors, but by Congress, economists, and the public. Was it time to change coin compositions again? Was the nickel too expensive to make? These questions, whispered quietly in 1973, would become louder by the end of the decade. Yet despite the economic storm, the mint pushed forward, keeping production high to meet commercial demand. For collectors, the 1973 Jefferson nickel is not rare, but it holds subtle surprises. And no major double dies, but minor die where exists. Full steps varieties, especially from Denver and Philadelphia, are hard to find and command higher value. Proofs from San Francisco are common but beautiful, especially with deep cameo contrast. A strike quality in 1973 was generally average, few sharp full step. Coins survive in circulation. The hallmark of a well-struck Jefferson nickel is the full steps designation, showing 5 or 6 distinct steps at Monticello's base. For 1973, these are uncommon and prized by detail-focused numismatists. Each 1973 nickel passed from hand to hand, pocket to pocket, through vending machines, payphones, bus fare slots. They witnessed change in a country transforming rapidly, yet clinging to symbols of stability. The Jefferson nickel, while small, remained a thread in the national fabric. The mint itself faced pressure, not just to produce coins, but to innovate. In 1973, preparations were already underway for the Eisenhower dollar. Inflation was altering metal value calculations, and the need for speed, precision, and volume had never been greater. The 1973 Jefferson nickel was born in this crucible, mass-produced, yet carrying decades of tradition. It was never flashy, never golden, never rare, but the 1973 Jefferson nickel remains a time capsule, capturing a year of turmoil, transition, and quiet resilience. The mint had changed, the world had changed, but Jefferson's face remained. It was a year of contradictions, a year where trust collapsed, prices soared, and yet, life went on. 1973, the year the Jefferson nickel found itself in a nation, struggling to understand what it had become. January 1973 began with hope. The Paris Peace Accords had been signed. The United States was withdrawing its final troops from Vietnam after nearly 2 decades of bitter, televised war. But hope gave way to scandal. Just months later, the Watergate hearings would begin. The president, once a figure of authority, was now a man under suspicion. Televisions glowed in kitchens and dens across America. People watched, stunned, as leaders dodged questions, resigned in disgrace, and the image of government cracked wide open. In October 1973, everything changed at the pump. The Yom Kippur War triggered an oil embargo by OPEC. The United States, dependent on foreign oil, was caught off guard. Gas prices jumped 400% in months. Inflation surged. A line snaked for blocks at filling stations. Americans began rethinking their economic future. The nickel, just 5 cents, suddenly had new weight. The price of oil had risen. But wages hadn't. Every cent mattered. But while the world trembled politically and economically, something deeper was happening too. The culture was shifting, evolving, sometimes clashing with itself. 1973 saw the Supreme Court's decision in Roe v. Wade. Women's liberation was now a mainstream conversation. African American voices, Native activists, and Chicano organizers pushed back against the limits of the past. The currency of identity, gender, race, class, was being spent, traded, and reclaimed on the streets of America. With inflation rising, Americans felt their paychecks thinning. In 1973, a gallon of milk cost 67 cents. A new house? Around $32,000. The minimum wage? Just $1.60 an hour. In a time of economic uncertainty, coins became symbols of survival. The 1973 nickel jingled in the pockets of truckers, teachers, and teenagers alike. Used for candy bars, jukeboxes, phone calls. It wasn't just money, it was movement, access, and sometimes even protest. 1973 was the year the US Mint quietly debated a difficult question. Could they keep making coins at the same cost? The metal content of nickels and pennies was becoming more expensive than their face value. Though the nickel survived unchanged, whispers of a new currency system were growing. A digital world loomed on the horizon. But in 1973, cash was still king. As America struggled, it danced. Music became escape. The movies became revolution. Pink Floyd released Dark Side of the Moon. Marlon Brando haunted theaters in The Godfather and Last Tango in Paris. People escaped into disco, into funk, into pop art rebellion. The Jefferson nickel changed hands at movie theaters, record stores, pinball arcades, glimpses of joy in an uncertain time. So where was the nickel in all this? Quiet, passive, ubiquitous. It traveled unnoticed through a nation searching for answers, neither rich nor rare, but persistent, a reminder that the smallest things in society, like a 5-cent coin, could still carry history in their ridges. 1973 wasn't just a year of news headlines. It was a turning point, a moment where the old cracked and the new wasn't quite formed. Through it all, the nickel endured. It was a simple object in a complex world, an everyday witness to extraordinary change, a nation in flux, reflected in 5 grams of metal. Every Jefferson nickel spends most of its life in the shadows, passed from hand to hand, tossed into jars, or lost under couch cushions. But among those billions of nickels, a few stand out. A few whisper to the patient, the careful, the collectors. And among the 1973 batch, some carry secrets worth discovering. Let's start with the basics. The value of a coin isn't just what's stamped on it. It's about condition, rarity, and demand. In the collector world, this is known as the holy trinity of value. A 1973 nickel fresh from the mint, untouched and perfectly struck, is a different animal than one found scratched in a grocery store parking lot. Let's talk about the legend, the myth, the obsession of Jefferson nickel collectors, the full steps. Sounds simple, but it's not. Due to weak strikes, worn dies, or misaligned presses, most nickels don't show full steps clearly. A 1973D regular strike, tilde, $1 in mint state. A 1973D, full steps, $20 to $100 plus depending on grade. A 1973, Philly, full steps in MS66 or better, even more. In the wild world of Jefferson nickels, a few clean lines can be the difference between spare change and a showpiece. But full steps aren't the only game in town. Sometimes, the US Mint gets it wrong. And for collectors, that's exactly what they're hoping for. Air off-center strikes, where the design is shifted, sometimes dramatically. A clipped planchets, a piece of the coin is missing due to misfeeding. Air double dies, rare, but possible. Look for doubling on lettering. A die cracks, small raised lines from a damaged die. A struck-throughs, Debris on the die leaves strange imprints. To the untrained eye, an error coin might look like a manufacturing defect. But in numismatics, an error isn't a flaw, it's a fingerprint of history. Are occasionally struck with cameo contrast. A deep cameo examples, especially flawless ones, bring $30 to $80 plus at auction. A look for frosting on the portrait, with mirrored fields. The US Mint, in 1973, produced hundreds of millions of nickels. The volume was staggering, and with that scale comes imperfection. Dies wear down, presses misalign, human eyes miss things. That's where the 1973 varieties sneak into the coin. World, hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be found. I spent 5 years looking for a clean, full steps, 1973p. Finally found one at a small show in Nebraska. The joy is in the hunt. You're not just collecting coins, you're collecting stories. Unlike gold coins or ancient rarities, Jefferson nickels are democratic. Anyone can search rolls, jars, or bank bags. And 1973 is still out there, in pockets, drawers, and couch cushions, waiting. To turn a great find into a serious collectible, it must be graded. Professional services like PCGS or NGC inspect and certify coins, protecting them in tamper-proof holders known as slabs. RMS 65, common. RMS 66 plus, scarce. RMS 66 full steps, valuable. RMS 67 full steps, rare, prized. The journey from pocket change to investment grade. Numismatic treasure starts with knowledge and a bit of luck. But for many, the value isn't just financial. It's historical, personal. A 1973 nickel could be a child's first find, a reminder of a father's collection, or a time capsule of a past America. It may be small, but inside every Jefferson nickel, especially the right, 1973, is a world of potential. In a sea of billions, a few 1973 nickels shine just a bit brighter. They carry mystery. They carry craftsmanship. They carry the thrill of discovery. Every coin bears a face, and behind that face, there's always another, a hand, an artist, and in the case of the Jefferson nickel, that artist was a quiet man from Germany, whose design would outlive wars, revolutions, and even the metal it struck upon. His name was Felix Schlag. Felix Oskar Schlag was born on September 4, 1891, in Frankfurt, Germany. Raised in a country teetering between empires and ideologies, he showed early talent in sculpture, and by the time he was a young man, he was studying at the famed Academy of Fine Arts in Munich. Studied under classical European sculptors, specialized in bas-relief and medallic art, served in World War I for the German army. After the war, faced a collapsed economy and rising political chaos. But like so many artists between the wars, Schlag saw his future dimming in a troubled Europe. In 1929, he made a life-altering decision. He brought his wife and 3 children to America, seeking not just opportunity, but survival. Settling in Chicago, Felix Schlag worked a string of jobs. He restored monuments, created public memorials, and quietly built a name for himself as a meticulous craftsman. But even in America, the Great Depression spared few. Commissions were rare. Money was tight. Then, in 1938, a strange opportunity arrived in the mail. A public design competition to replace the Buffalo nickel. Requirements: a portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, and Monticello, Jefferson's home, on the reverse. A deadline: April 15, 1938. A prize: $1,000. Schlag, now 47, seized the moment. It was a chance not just for money, but for immortality. Felix studied the few surviving portraits of Jefferson. He read the letters. He visited libraries. He traced the lines of Monticello from photographs. But more importantly, he tried to capture a feeling: dignity, enlightenment, American idealism. A obverse, Jefferson in profile. A reverse, a dramatic, angled view of Monticello with stylized trees. A signature style, minimalist, clean, neoclassical. The design was unlike any circulating coin at the time. In April of 1938, The US Mint reviewed 390 submissions. After deliberation, one design stood out. Felix Schlag was declared the winner. But victory didn't come without friction. The Mint didn't like Schlag's stylized Monticello. Too artistic, too abstract. They demanded a simpler, more realistic version and told him to start over. A Mint required a straight-on view of Monticello, a removal of artistic flourishes, a change in typography. Schlag complied, but in doing so, he lost something of himself in the final design. His artistic vision, streamlined for federal approval. A Schlag signature did not appear on the coin until 1966, nearly 30 years after he won the competition. On November 15, 1938, the first Jefferson nickels entered circulation. By the end of the year, over 120 million were struck. A replaced the Buffalo nickel after 25 years. A featured on wartime nickels during World War II. A seen in millions of hands during key American decades. A one of the most circulated coins in US history. Schlag's work became invisible by design, seen by all, known by few. For decades, Felix Schlag lived quietly in Illinois. He never designed another US coin. But among numismatists, his work gained respect. And in 1966, 3 decades after his win, the US Mint finally allowed his initials to appear on the nickel. The letters FS below Monticello starting in 1966. It was a small gesture, but for an artist whose work had touched every American hand, it meant the world. Felix Schlag passed away in 1974 at the age of 83. He lived long enough to see his design become one of the most recognizable in American history, yet his name remained known mostly to collectors. Today, artists still fight for visibility, still struggle to find permanence in a disposable world. But Felix Schlag did what few sculptors ever manage. He put his vision into every pocket. He gave Jefferson a face and gave Americans a monument they'd carry through wars, recessions, and revolutions. It's easy to overlook a nickel. It's light, dull, common, but for nearly a century, that small silver disc has held a front row seat in American life. From soda shops to wartime rationing, from pinball machines to your first bubblegum, it has always been more than 5 cents. It has been a symbol, a rite of passage, a memory. For much of the 20th century, a nickel could buy you joy, a Coke, a scoop of vanilla ice cream, a ride on the carousel. It wasn't just currency, it was access. Common nickel purchases: 1920s, 1950s. A bottle of Coca-Cola, 5 cents. A newspaper, 5 cents. A candy bar, 5 cents. A Nickelodeon theater entry, 5 cents. A gum, popcorn, stamps, all a nickel. In cities, young couples fed nickels into jukeboxes. In small towns, paperboys earned them one at a time. And in every corner store, the nickel bought more than goods, it bought independence. But in times of war, even the nickel had to serve. 1942 to 1945, the wartime nickel. Made from 56% copper, 35% silver, 9% manganese. Why? Nickel metal was needed for armor plating and military production. Wartime nickels had a large mint mark above. Monticello, unique among US coins. These coins were minted with a mission. They weren't just for candy, they were part of the war effort. By the 1970s, the nickel had changed faces, but not purpose. It was still your ticket to fun. Nickels in recreation. Pinball machines. Early models 1 play equals 5 cents. Early arcade games accepted nickels before switching to quarters. Coin-op pool tables, jukeboxes, vending machines. Long before microtransactions and streaming, entertainment came 1 nickel at a time. Walk into any diner in post-war America, and the nickel greeted you at the counter. A Coke, a nickel, a small fries, maybe 2. Coca-Cola pricing history, held at 5 cents for over 70 years, 1886 to 1959, one of the most famous nickel-priced products in US history. The nickel Coke became legend, a relic of pricing stability in a country constantly changing. For many children, the nickel was the first taste of money, their first allowance. their first choice. Nickel memories. A ice cream truck, fudgesicle equals 5 cents. A Cracker Jack box, 5 cents. A gumball machines. A comic books, early issues in the 1930s 40s. It sat heavy in small pockets, warm from nervous fingers. And when spent, it vanished in an instant, but the memory never did. Even in language, the nickel holds a place. Cultural idioms. A nickel's worth. Not worth a plug nickel. A nickel and dime, to cheapen or trivialize. A drop a nickel, to inform, 1940 slang. Give me your 2 cents versus put in your nickel. Political references. A nickel defense in football. A nickel fare in early public transit. A nickel tax proposals often aimed at syntaxes, soda, plastic bags, etc. The 5-cent piece has crept into metaphors, slang, and strategy. A small coin, endlessly echoed. But as inflation rose and technology evolved, the nickel began to fade. Economic realities. Today, 5 cents buys very little. A manufacturing cost to face value costs 7-8 cents to mint. A less used in retail. Vending machines round to 10 cents or 25 cents. A debate about abolishing the coin altogether. What was once a child's dream ticket is now pocket clutter. Yet somehow, the nickel endures. Not in value, but in sentiment. In modern life, used in coin tosses, a staple of coin collecting, a memory triggers for older generations, a symbol of thrift, nostalgia, Americana. You might not bend over for a nickel on the sidewalk, but you'd sure tell your kid what it once bought. Trivia and pop culture moments. A Nickelodeon, named after 5-cent admission theaters. A Canada's 5-cent coin features a beaver. A nickel night in baseball promotions. The Buffalo nickel featured in TV shows and Western films. A Jefferson nickel featured in a famous Twilight Zone episode. The nickel may be fading, but its legacy is printed on the soul of a nation. In soda shops and arcades, in war and childhood. It reminded us that value doesn't always come in dollars. Sometimes, it's in the simplest change. For over 150 years, the nickel has traveled in our pockets. Through soda shops, wars, jukeboxes, arcades, and cash drawers. But today, it stands at a crossroads. In a world of digital wallets, contactless payments, and rising inflation, what happens to a coin that no longer buys anything? Facts. As of the 2020s, it costs 7 to 9 cents to mint a 5-cent coin, made of 75% copper and 25% nickel. The US Mint produces hundreds of millions per year. A loss, millions of taxpayer dollars annually. It sounds absurd, but the 5-cent coin costs nearly twice its face value to produce. Every nickel minted is a loss for the government. US Treasury report, and that loss adds up. Arguments for elimination. A cost inefficiency, over $100 million in losses over 15 years. A low purchasing power, can't buy goods alone anymore. A retail rounding feasible. Many countries round to nearest 10 cents, Canada, New Zealand, etc. Digital payments dominate. Contactless, cards, apps are common. Many nations have already said goodbye to their low-denomination coins. In 2013, Canada killed the penny, and the nickel may not be far behind. Public polls. A Pew, 2020 55% of Americans support eliminating pennies. Around 35 to 40% support eliminating the nickel. Arguments for preservation. A tradition and identity, deep cultural history. A low-income access. Cash remains crucial for 7% plus of Americans. A vending, transit machines, still accept nickels. A collector and educational use, entry coin for numismatics. Inflation doesn't remove symbolism. There's more than just economics at stake. The nickel is woven into memory, culture, and class. Not everyone can tap to pay. Some still count change. Community banker, Alabama. For many, the nickel still matters. It's not just about value, it's about being seen. Digital trends. By 2025, over 70% of US transactions are projected to be cashless. Microtransactions are now digital, no coins needed. Increasing reliance on rounding algorithms in retail. Digital tipping, vending machines with card readers. As we shift to digits and touchscreens, the humble nickel is left behind. Cashless retail examples are Amazon Go stores, or airports, or food delivery platforms, or arcades now use digital credits. It was once a coin of the future. Now, it's a relic of the past. Mining copper and nickel has high ecological impact. Energy-intensive minting process. A disposal and recycling of coins is inefficient. It's not just about cost, it's about carbon. Bills introduced, e.g., coin metal modification bills. A lobbying by vending industries and mining corporations. And no successful vote yet to eliminate nickel. The politics of 5 cents is surprisingly complicated. Coins are tangible, sensory, immediate. Give a sense of control, security, tradition. A coin toss equals fate. Dropping coins equals charity. A card swipe is invisible. But a nickel? You can feel it, hear it, remember it. Coin tossing determines the start of every NFL game. The US Mint still mints over 600 million nickels annually despite inefficiency. To the numismatist, the end of the nickel would be the closing of a chapter. Nickel collecting highlights. A full steps Jeffersons are highly valued. A 1950 D, 1939 D, wartime silvers prized. A 1,973 nickels, your star, often overlooked, but rising in relevance. Collectors know that when something ends, it becomes more valuable. So what now? What will become of the 5-cent piece? Possible futures. A remain, unchanged, status quo continues. A redesign or revalue, lighter alloys, smaller size. A elimination, round transactions, end production. A go digital, commemorative status only. It may fade from wallets, but it may never fade from memory. The 5-cent coin is more than math. It's a measure of where we've been, and a question about where we are going. Will it survive the next generation? Or will it become just another artifact? A whisper from the jingle in our pockets? It is a small thing. We pass it by in drawers, we toss it into jars, we leave it on countertops, forgotten. But behind the modest 5-cent coin lies a current that runs deep. Through the veins of history. Through war and peace, hardship and hope. And into the very fabric of the American soul. Look closely at a nickel, really look. You'll see not just the profile of a president, but a reflection of America at every stage. From chapter highlights. A born from war, shield nickels during Reconstruction. A redefined by change, liberty and Buffalo styles. A grounded in vision, Jefferson's ideals. A carried through crises, WW2, inflation, recession. A mind, minted, moved, and still moving. In 1973, the country stood in flux. Trust in government cracked, the economy strained. The culture shifted beneath our feet. And in all of it, quiet, constant, unremarkable, was the nickel. Why it matters. A 1973 nickel was minted in the shadow of Nixon's presidency. It lived through disco and deregulation. It bought candy in the 70s. Laid dormant in coin jars for decades. And may still rest in someone's pocket today. It was never heroic. It was never rare. But it was there. Always. Jefferson's face watches left, unlike other coins. Perhaps symbolically, he looks back, toward history. Toward the republic he helped define. Design symbolism. A Monticello, architectural clarity, balance. A leftward gaze, looking to the past to shape the future. A Schlag's vision, classical beauty in a modern republic. It was never just metal. It was message. We traded nickels for gumballs, for jukebox songs, for coffee in diners lit by neon and hope. A nickel was the cost of a smile, a memory, a moment. Anecdotes and symbols. A 5 cents to play pinball. 2 nickels for a payphone call. Don't have 2 nickels to rub. Together, a measure of poverty. And perseverance. For generations, it marked what we could afford. And what we dreamed of. 5 cents. It's not much. But then, meaning was never measured in dollars. Emotional perspective. The nickel as an anchor to the past. A relic of analog life. A symbol of simplicity in complexity. The 1973 Jefferson nickel is not valuable to investors, but to historians, to artists, to children who once counted change under fluorescent light. It is priceless. Whether it continues or fades into history, the nickel has already made its mark, not by being bold, not by being rare, but by simply being there. Closing quotes, visual overlays. In the end, we treasure not what was valuable, but what was present. Anonymous numismatist. A coin doesn't just carry currency, it carries a country. Felix Schlag, imagined echo. This is the legacy of the 1973 nickel. A small round token, a quiet constant, a witness to our story. In the folds of wallets, in jars on shelves. It lives not just in metal, but in memory. To hold a coin is to hold time. 5 cents. 1 century. 1,000,000 stories. What do you think about the design and history of this coin? Do you have one in your collection? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more coin history stories from around the world. Hit the bell icon to never miss an upload from Coin History Worldwide. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep discovering history, one coin at a time.